Would you watch a live stream of a death vacation in a luxury Tuscan villa turned deadly trap? Two couples fall victim to a nuisance streamer. Linda races to find her husband Tom, only to be lured into the steaming sauna, where his charred corpse locks hers in, cranking the heat to boil her alive. Meanwhile, pinned to the wall in a pool of her own blood, Jennifer becomes the final masterpiece. The mastermind rubs his hands together, smiling as the live stream surpasses 3 million viewers. The deafening explosive crack ripped through the barn, echoing from the second-floor loft, followed by a heavy, wet thud. The women froze, their eyes locking in a shared, unspoken terror. The silence that followed was deafening. "Tom?" Linda whispered, her voice barely audible. "Tom?" She called out, louder this time, her voice cracking with a new rising panic. She looked at Jennifer, who was now staring in the direction of the loft. Linda's own courage, which had been so fragile just moments before, now hardened to grim resolve. "Stay here," she said, her voice low and firm. "Don't move. I'll be right back." Linda slowly pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. She swallowed hard against a throat that was suddenly bone dry. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she pushed the fear down. Jennifer was depending on her. Tom was depending on her. She started moving, her small circle of light cutting a path through the thickening darkness, heading towards the location she thought she heard Tom shout. As she passed the hall, rickety shelves of storage area, a loud clatter from above made her jump. A stack of heavy-looking boxes tipped and then tumbled down, crashing onto the floor directly in her path and throwing up a cloud of dust. The way was blocked. She was forced to take a detour, her light now sweeping past the lounge area and towards the glass-enclosed sauna. The sauna's interior lights flickered on, bathing the small, wood-paneled room in a soft, warm glow. The space was already thick with steam, and through the swirling vapor she saw a figure. A man slumped on the bench. "Tom!" she cried. All her fear, all her trepidation was instantly erased by a wave of pure, desperate joy. She sprinted the remaining distance and threw the heavy glass door open, rushing inside. "Tom, baby, are you okay?" she yelled, stepping into the wall of heat. The image of her husband flickered and dissolved into the swirling steam. A sudden, bone-chilling premonition washed over her. She spun around just as the heavy glass door slammed shut with the force of a guillotine. The sound of a lock clicked into place with absolute finality. Outside the glass, standing by the control panel, was Tom. But it wasn't Tom as she knew him. It was his corpse, its empty, dripping eye sockets fixed on her, as its blackened, smoking hand slowly, deliberately turned the temperature dial to the maximum setting. A strangled sob escaped her lips as she threw herself against the door, pounding on the thick, unyielding glass that was already hot to the touch. She glanced at the digital display next to the door, its red numbers, a mocking beacon in the swirling steam. They were climbing with impossible speed. 180 degrees, 220 degrees, 270 degrees. The digits blurred as they ascended into a range that was no longer safe. Her first breath of the superheated steam was an agony she could never have imagined, a searing pain that felt like swallowing fire. It cooked the delicate tissues of her throat and lungs, and she began coughing and gagging. Thin pink froth bubbled on her lips. Her skin, already an angry, blotchy red, began to blister under the relentless assault of the wet, superheated air. The pain was a white-hot symphony of agony, 1,000 needles piercing every inch of her body at once. A final, desperate surge of adrenaline gave her strength. She began blindly searching for a way out, her palms searing as she slapped them against the seamless wooden walls, looking for a panel, a vent, anything. The air steam was so thick she could barely see through it now, and each breath was a fresh torment, scorching her throat and lungs until she could only manage shallow, ragged gasps. The edges of her vision began to darken as her body cooked from the inside out. She stumbled toward the glass door. As she drew near, the charred figure of her husband, who had been watching her motionlessly, glided to the other side of the glass. Now, inches away, Linda could see the full, gruesome details of its appearance. Tom's eyes were gone, his skin blackened and split. What stood before her was not the man she loved, but a grotesque mockery. The sight, combined with the unbearable heat and the searing pain, was too much. A silent, hopeless sob shook her body, and the tears that streamed from her eyes turned to steam the moment they touched her blistering cheeks. Her legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor in a heap, the darkness in her vision surging inwards to consume her. As she lay dying, her gaze met Tom's gaping, empty sockets. The ruined head tilted slowly to one side, and the blackened, lipless mouth stretched into something that could only be described as a smile. Linda tried to scream, but no sound came. Her vision collapsed to a single point of light, then went black. Her body gave one final violent shudder, and then she was still. The only movement in the sauna was the relentless rise of the steam, curling around her lifeless form like a shroud. Jennifer remained by the hot tub. She had heard the boxes fall, a loud, startling crash, and then nothing. A profound, unnatural silence that felt heavier and more terrifying than any scream. Linda had gone to check on Tom, and now she was gone too. "Get up," she told herself, her voice a silent scream in her own mind. "Get up. You have to move. You have to find her." The thought of Linda alone and possibly hurt gave her a surge of adrenaline, and she pushed herself to move. She pulled out her phone and fumbled to turn on the flashlight, her fingers clumsy and slick with a mixture of water and sweat. Just as the beam clicked on, the barn's high-end sound system exploded to life at maximum volume. A wall of distorted, screeching static slammed into her, so loud and so sudden she screamed, and her phone flew from her grasp, arcing through the air before landing in the hot tub with a quiet plunk. As the static roared, the barn's main lights flickered on, not the warm, inviting glow from before, but a harsh, sterile white that bleached all the color from the room. In that light, she saw the massive main door, the one that had been barred and immovable, was now slightly ajar. A dark vertical slit of freedom in the wall of wood. Jennifer didn't question it. She just ran. She threw her shoulder against the heavy door, grunting with effort, and managed to widen the gap just enough to squeeze her body through. She stumbled out into the cold night air, the sound of the screeching static still ringing in her ears, and sprinted for the main villa. She burst through the unlocked front door, her breath coming in ragged, desperate gasps. The power was on. A soft, classical piece of music was playing. It was a scene of perfect, mocking normalcy. "A phone," she gasped, her eyes darting around the entryway. "I need a phone!" She ran through the downstairs rooms, her bare feet slapping against the terracotta tiles, the living room, the dining room, and the small study. Finally, in the dark, wood-paneled library, she found a vintage rotary-style telephone sitting on the heavy oak desk. She lunged for it, her fingers closing around the heavy black receiver. She lifted it to her ear, her heart pounding with a desperate, fragile hope, but she was met by empty silence. As she stood there, clutching the dead receiver, A loud, violent crash erupted from the back of the villa. It sounded like every pot and pan in the kitchen being thrown to the floor at once. Her head snapped up, her grief and terror momentarily replaced by a flicker of desperate hope. "Linda?" She dropped the phone and ran to the large, professional-grade kitchen, its stainless steel surfaces gleaming under the bright, modern lighting. The room was empty, but it was in complete chaos. Cabinet doors hung open and bowls and plates were spilled onto the floor. Bags of flour and sugar had been ripped open, their white contents dusting every surface like a fine layer of snow. Jars of spice were scattered, their fragrant contents mixing into a strange, cloying potpourri. "Linda?" Jennifer whispered, her voice trembling. She took a slow, hesitant step into the room and scanned the destruction, her eyes darting from one mess to the next. A slight movement caught her eye, and she looked at a pile of pans. In each gleaming surface, the same impossible nightmare was reflected. It was standing right behind her, so close she could feel a profound, unnatural coldness radiating from it, a void where warmth and life were supposed to be. Its skin was a waxy, translucent parchment, stretched so tight over its skeletal frame that she could see the dark, pulsing geography of veins beneath. Its limbs were impossibly long and thin, joined in all the wrong places, and they moved with a constant, subtle series of micro-twitches and clicks like a spider testing the strands of its web. The head was a smooth, elongated ovoid, like some deep-sea insect that lacked any feature save for two enormous almond-shaped pits of polished obsidian that drank the light and reflected her own terrified face back at her, twisted into a mask of silent, screaming horror. Its body was hairless and androgynous, and adorned not with clothes, but with a lattice of intricate symbols carved directly into the parchment skin. They were not scars, they were fresh, raw, and they wept a thin black oily ichor that moved with a life of its own, slowly tracing the lines of the glyphs. A wave of primal biological revulsion washed over her, so powerful it made her gag. The primal revulsion that had frozen Jennifer in place finally broke, and a raw, piercing scream was torn from her throat. She spun around, her bare feet slipping on the flour-dusted floor, and scrambled for the doorway. The entity didn't move. It simply tilted its elongated head, and the fine layer of flour and sugar that dusted every surface began to stir, rising from the floor in counters in the swirling, ghostly white cloud. Then the knives lifted from the magnetic block on the counter. The entire set rose into the air and formed a swirling silver vortex at the center of the room. A tornado of polished, razor-sharp steel. The entity gestured, and she was lifted from her feet, suspended in the heart of the storm of blades. The first knife, a long, thin, boning knife, plunged into her thigh, and she screamed a wet, gurgling sound. Another buried itself in her shoulder. The knives struck her from all directions, a brutal, percussive assault of piercing steel. They tore through her stomach, her arms, her legs, each impact a fresh wave of agony. Finally, the heavy cleaver, which had been circling her like a patient shark, flew forward. It struck her square in the chest with a sound like a watermelon being split, burying itself to the hilt. Jennifer's body was then slammed against the far wall, and the knives that were stuck into her began to push through her body, impaling her to the wall. Her head lolled forward, her blood pouring from a score of wounds. A final macabre masterpiece in the center of the chaos. 1,000 miles from the chaos, Julian Belrose sat in the cool, quiet darkness of his study. On one of his monitors, the 4 life sign readouts, which had been spiking and plunging in a frantic dance, now settled into 4 flat, serene lines. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played on his lips. He glanced at the secondary monitor, the live stream statistics. The viewer count had just ticked over 3 million. A soft, pleasant ding echoed in the quiet of his study as another large donation rolled in. He picked up a sleek burner phone from his desk and dialed a number from memory. It rang twice before a clipped professional voice answered. 4 this time, Julian said, his voice calm and even. I need recontainment. There was a pause on the other end. Julian listened, his eyes still on the flatlined monitors. Yes, he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. A diebuck box. He listened for another moment, then ended the call and disassembled the phone, throwing the pieces in the trash can under his desk. He turned his attention back to the live stream and typed a single final message in the chat box. Till next time, and ended the stream. Then he opened a new browser tab and navigated to a high-end boutique travel website. He found the listing for the Tuscan villa, its pictures showing a sun-drenched paradise of rolling hills and rustic charm. He clicked on the admin portal, entered his credentials, and marked the property as under maintenance. The listing vanished from the public site. Finally, he opened a Tor browser, its icon a purple onion on his desktop. He navigated to a familiar address, reddit.com/r/blue horror stories. The page loaded a list of stories, and he began to read, his eyes scanning the titles, looking for a spark of inspiration. He opened a fresh document on his computer and began to take notes, his fingers flying across the keyboard, already building the foundations of his next masterpiece. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. You are what hold this channel together. If you like the story, please consider subscribing, liking the video, and leaving your thoughts down below in the comment section. Let us know what kind of stories you would like to see next week. Are you strong enough to survive the tower? In a shattered world of endless rubble, a lone tower stands as a deadly beacon, drawing the lost and the damned. Survivors scrape out a wretched existence below, fearing the stragglers, twisted horrors blooming with black flesh. In the upper chambers, flesh yields to something stronger, something eternal. They beg for help. She gave them transformation. You enter the tower, none leave unchanged. Ascend if you dare, but the light at the top devours everything human. We called it the tower, though it was not a tower. It was, so a few remaining scraps of records seemed to indicate a fragment of a skyscraper, the tallest structure still standing from a city that had once been here, before the collapse. Long before any of us were born, the tower that was not a tower was the only thing rising to any height above the rubble. Like a beacon, it drew stragglers in. We lived in the rubble, coming and going through holes we had dug down into half-collapsed basements and sub-basements. We grew fungi and mushrooms and caught the scattered, deformed vermin that still scuttled about. Sometimes we would leave our holes and make our way down to the water's edge and coax a twisted and listless creature or two out of the silty water by tickling its belly, and then take it back and roast it over a fire. Only then, judging by the smell of it, the odor, whether it continued to move after that, we thought it was its head had been separated from what we thought was its body. We did decide whether we could bear to choke it down or if we could simply let it blacken and vanish into ash. We felt the weight of the tower above us, even when we could not see it. We spoke about it often, about whether we should try to tear it down, or if we tore it down, Some of us believed there would be fewer stragglers, but others pointed out that when stragglers came, they always went straight to the tower. Having glimpsed the glow illuminating its upper chambers, once they went in, they rarely, if ever, came out again. And besides, if we tore it down, we would have to reckon with craftiness. Craftiness had once been like us, scrabbling among the rubble, filthy and starved. She had her hole, which had been Angsdale's hole before a straggler took him. She struggled with the rest of us, cowered too when stragglers appeared. And then one day someone wandered in, possessed of that look that stragglers have, the flesh blooming black across its chest. We barricaded our holes and watched it wander by, drawn to the tower. It came and halted at the tower's base, simply stared up. This was before there was a beacon shining on the upper floor. It was Craftiness who would later illuminate the beacon. Still, even without the beacon, stragglers would be drawn to the tower. One would come and stare, and then, often as not, poke around at our holes. If we were unfortunate, it might drag one of us out and carry them off. If we were lucky, once it was tired of staring at the tower, the straggler would either simply wander past the holes without a second glance, or he would manage to trap it beneath a deadfall trap, where it would remain, slowly writhing for a year or perhaps two until finally it stopped. This time we were not lucky, or rather, Craftiness was not lucky. The straggler stayed there staring for a day, perhaps two, and then moved straight towards Craftiness's hole. It was clumsy, as all stragglers are, and quickly sprung the deadfall she had made. The rock tipped, but instead of falling and trapping it, the rock simply dealt the straggler a blow that propelled it the quicker into Craftiness's hole, and, once the creature was in, blocked the entrance. We heard Craftiness's scream, and then the sounds of her struggling in the darkness. She would soon be dead, we were sure, though she cried from time to time for us to help her. After a while, we crept out from our own holes and stood listening. We even tested the stone that had fallen and determined that yes, 2 or 3 of us straining together might roll it away. We could roll it away, and then perhaps she could escape. But we did not roll the stone away. By the time we had determined we could, we no longer heard her, and it seemed foolish to move a stone when a straggler roamed behind it. No, better, we reasoned, to simply leave things as they were, to let life run its bloody course. A day went by, then 2, 1 week, then several. Life returned to normal, if normal it had ever been. We forgot about the straggler, forgot about Craftiness. Other stragglers came and went. We experienced a brief onslaught of creatures that might be said to resemble mice, save for the unnatural number of limbs they had. 7. They were tasty, and could be eaten whole when lightly seared over a fire. And then, from one day to the next, they vanished, and no new creature replaced them. One day, one of us, Thurn, was moving through the rubble, remembering those mice that were not mice and searching for more, when he heard movement from Craftiness's hole. Gripping the top of the stone that blocked the entrance were 2 hands, pale as bone, glinting. The straggler. He thought at first, though no straggler had ever had such hands as these, or even hands to speak of at all. And then, as Thurm watched, the hands flexed and strained, and the stone cracked as easily as it were a children's toy, and Craftiness stepped out. She had changed greatly. She was bone white and covered with an almost translucent dusting of scale. Her features were severe, and her bearing, too, was different. She walked in a jerky, swaying way, as if she stood on stilts. "Craftiness," said Thurn, "you are alive." When she spoke, Thurn told us before he expired. She moved her jaw in an unnatural way. Her voice, when it came, was the voice of someone who had not spoken in so long. She had nearly forgotten how. "No thanks, Dee," she whispered. Even these words made her mouth bleed as if moving it was scratching it from the inside. And then she reached out, and in a single terrible movement tore off Thurn's arm. We were all brought out of our holes by the sound of Thurn's scream. Craftiness had already turned and was walking away, moving in those awkward, measured steps towards the tower, the arm slung over her shoulder like a club or a gun, blood drizzling down her back. Thurn managed to babble what had happened, and then died there on the ground. Craftiness never looked back, simply walked to the tower and vanished into its base. We buried Thurn, deep enough that stragglers would be unlikely to find him. We entered Craftiness's hole, but it proved empty. There was no sign of the straggler that had been there with her, no waste or other residue. Indeed, the interior of the hole was immaculately clean and a little slick, as if it had been licked over and over. Once she entered the tower, she never left it. After a few years, we weren't certain she was even alive, or wouldn't have been had it not been for the light burning each night on the uppermost floor, and for what appeared at the tower's base. At first, we saw only a glimmer, nothing distinguishable, and we kept our distance. But then, slowly, our curiosity got the better of us. We had not approached the tower earlier, even before Craftiness took residence in it. Now we cast lots. The loser, it was determined, was to get closer and determine what they could about the glimmer and about whether it was a threat to us. I was the loser. Over the course of one long day, I edged slowly closer to the base of the tower, ready to turn and flee at any instant. But when nothing moved, when nothing came after me, I became bolder. I moved forward until I could see clearly that the glinting thing was a metal statue of a man, standing at attention, stylized and nearly featureless. Soon I was beside it. I took a short length of pipe from the ground and prodded the statue with it, and suddenly the thing whirred to life. The pipe twisted free of my hands and flew end over end to thunk into the remnants of a concrete wall. It stuck there as if it were a thrown axe or an arrow from a bow. I turned to run, but somehow the statue was already blocking my path, and I was unsure how to get around it while still staying alive. Joints clicking, the statue extended its arms wide and began to walk slowly toward me. "Please, please," it said, though it had no mouth. I could see. The words seemed to appear almost within my own head, as if I were reading them. "You are welcome here. You are our guest." I looked behind me and tried to sidle to one side, but it was as if the statue had anticipated my movement. Slowly, I was being coaxed deeper into the tower. "Please, please," the statue said. "Welcome, welcome." And then, "Did you call ahead? Did you? No matter, no matter. We shall find some way to accommodate you." It forced me deep into a large room, the one that filled the whole base of the tower. In the center were two crystalline shafts, tubes stretching up into the air to touch the ceiling 10 meters above. At the bottom of each of these shafts was a little room. Slowly, with shooing motions, it ushered me into one. The walls were of brushed steel, the only decoration a rectangular panel just inside the entrance, covered with circles numbered 1 to 16. "What floor?" the statue asked. "What floor?" "Floor?" I asked. I was unsure of what exactly it was asking of, or what to say. But apparently, what I had said had been enough. It reached around the corner and into the little room and pressed the circle marked 4. "A good trip, sir," said the statue. "A very good trip." And then it turned and made its way back to the entrance. After a moment, a brushed steel wall slid sideways to seal me in the room, and then there was a brief grinding noise, and this wall slid back and revealed a chamber outside, exactly as it had been before. I pressed the circle marked 4, and the same sequence occurred. Nothing further. I waited for something more to happen, but nothing did. And the next time I depressed the circle, a little room remained as it had been when I first stepped into it. No closing wall, no grinding noise. Eventually I stepped out of the tiny room again, and, giving the statue a wide berth, made my way across the larger room into a broken window. I climbed through it and made my way swiftly out, expecting the statue again to come to life and stop me, but it never did. Which was why, 5 years later, when the vermin ran out altogether and we finally decided we could not do without Hraftinus's help, I was sent to the tower. I had survived entering it when I was young, or at least younger. I was the only one, person or straggler, to enter the tower and come out alive. Didn't that prove I was chosen? No, I said, it doesn't. Lucky, then, they said. The others, the ones that were us but weren't me. Lucky is enough. Lucky is all we have. I could have resisted. I could have refused to go, or could have pretended to go and then left the ruined city altogether. But to be honest, I was curious, and I figured perhaps she had realized that it was I, though too young to do much, who, when she was trapped in her hole with the straggler, had shouted, pounded on the stone, and tried to move it until the others dragged me away. Was it I? I think it was. At least, it seems that way to me now. Besides, what sort of life did I have? Did I care to remain and slowly die of starvation along with the others? Perhaps she would kill me, though would that be much worse? Near the entrance, I came across the same statue. It was on its side now, sleeping perhaps, or perhaps broken. I did not touch it. Not wanting to tempt fate, I did not even step over it. Instead, I climbed in the window I had climbed out of before. I entered one of the 2 small rooms at the bottom of the crystalline shafts, pressed the button as I had seen the statue do. Nothing happened. No grinding noise, no door closing. The same was the case with the other small room. I decided to explore the base of the tower. It was a large, echoing chamber, empty except for 2 small rooms and the crystalline shafts. And yet, as I walked along its perimeter, I saw in the walls 4 indentations spaced evenly from one another, 4 compass points disrupting the edge of its circular chamber. One was indeed little more than an alcove, and the one directly across from it was the same. But each of the remaining 2, if you entered, had a lump of the size of a fist, its back wall that could be tugged upon to open a door. I opened one and saw a flight of stairs zigzagging skyward. I climbed them, clambering upward, until the point where they abruptly broke off, the well that the stairs were in having partly collapsed. I prodded and poked at the rubble, as it was soon clear to me that there would be no going further, and so I traced my way back down and tried the other door. Here I had better luck. The stairs broke off halfway up, but they were not fully blocked. I could crouch up to where the stairwell was open again. Though there was no further stairs, there dangled the end of a rope, the strand knotted every yard or so, all the way to the top. I got a hold of it and pulled myself up, hand over hand, the wind whistling around me. Halfway up, I paused, dizzy. If she wanted to, I realized, Hraftinus could simply untie the rope before I reached safety. That would be the end of me. Still dizzy, I kept climbing, more rapidly now. When at last I reached the ledge on the top, I rolled onto it and lay there panting, waiting for the world to stop spinning. When I felt all right again, I stood and went to the door. I tried the handle and found it unlocked. For a moment, I almost opened it, then thought better of it. Instead, I softly knocked. "Come in," she said immediately, no hint of surprise in her voice, no hesitation. I turned the handle and went in. She was in the first room, sitting in an ornate chair. She was even paler than I remembered from seeing her walk away, brandishing Thurn's arm. And severe, as if she were made of bone rather than flesh and blood. From a closed door behind her came a noise like a straggler tearing another straggler apart. Then she saw me. She smiled slightly, lips closed. "I have been expecting you," she said. There was a strange warble to her voice, as though she were speaking underwater, as though she weren't used to it, to speaking. Expecting me? I sat down. I kept my eyes on the door behind her. The noises had diminished somewhat, but never completely stopped. "To be honest, I expected you before now. You think because I live above you I do not know anything about you, but I do. I know everything. You've come here because you need help," she said. "All of you need help, and yet only you come." "I was chosen to come to represent the others," I explained. "Just as you were chosen before to investigate my chem at the base of the tower," she said. "Why is it always only you?" "Chem?" I asked. "Ah," I said. "You mean the statue?" She laughed, the noise high and bird-like. It mused. "If you like," she said. She stood and crossed to a table on the other side of the room. There was something wrong with the way she walked, tipping from side to side, her boots oddly deflated at the tips of her toes, and a good part of the fore of her foot had been removed. She took 2 porcelain cups from the tabletop, turned them upright, and filled them with a samovar resting on the table's center. Or, not a samovar exactly, something I did not have a word for. She brought me to one of the steaming cups and returned with the other to her chair. "Sit," she said. "Drink." I did not sit, nor did I drink. She sat there regarding me, as motionless as a statue herself. Finally she moved. "You come asking something of me," she said, "and yet you will not accept my hospitality." And so, knowing what I needed from her and not knowing how we would proceed with my doing otherwise, I finally sat and sipped from the cup she had given me. When she had finished her tea, she leaned down and placed the cup on the floor beside the chair. I did the same. "I will be frank with you," she said. "I will not help them. They do not help me. Why should I help them?" "We will die without you," I said. "They will die without me," she said. "I did not say I would not help you." And then she smiled in a way that revealed her mouth to have more rows of teeth than I knew to be possible. "Though you might well regret how I do," she added. I tried to speak, but I could not speak. I tried to stand, but could not move. "Please don't be concerned," she said. "It's temporary. It will wear off soon." She walked over to my chair and picked up the cup. "It was unkind of me to deceive you into drinking this tea." A moment later, I slid from my chair to the floor. My eyes were still open. I could see everything. "It won't last long," she said. I watched her legs approach her boots. She teetered toward me, then began to drag me by the arms towards the door in the back of the room. When she opened it, the noise inside grew louder. It still sounded like one straggler tearing another weaker straggler apart, though it was too dark to see anything clearly, to see what exactly it was. She dragged me in. Abruptly, the noise ceased. Then she smiled once down at me. "Soon it will wear off," she said. "Your extremities are perhaps already tingling. When sufficient time has passed, if you are still alive, I will open the door and let you out." She went out. Slowly, she slid the door shut, bolting it from the outside, and left me in the darkness. I was there for days, weeks perhaps, and the things that happened to me were far too terrible, are far too terrible still. There was light and noise, a flutter of wings that were not wings, a man screaming who both was and was not me, the breaths of other creatures tugging at my extremities, the seepage of one skin through another skin, the loss of most of one foot, then the loss of the most of the other, a man pounding on the door and begging in a voice not entirely his own to be set free. But in the end, She was not the one to open the door. I was the one who opened the door, breaking the door down as easily as she had broken the stone that had blocked her hole. I was not myself by that time, though in telling this I believe I have learned how to pretend to be myself again. I broke the door down and came out intending to kill her. However, I did not kill her. Instead, upon seeing her, that desire faded to be replaced by wonder. Here, I found myself thinking, is perhaps the only other being in the world who can understand what I have become. And there we stood, bone-white, the both of us, regarding one another. The doorway opened behind me upon a room that was, now, immaculate, that looked almost as if it had been licked clean, which indeed, as I knew all too well, it had. We have not come down from the tower, she and I. That is not to say that others have not come up, even those I once knew, looking for food, looking for help. They have not come down from the tower either, albeit for other reasons entirely. You will not find them. Indeed, there is no sign they were ever here. Can your mind see beyond your eyes? Alone in the void, a solitary traveler awakens far too soon. He sees it, a smear on the bulkhead, something that the ship insists isn't there. The voice in his head whispers rules he must obey, while his body wastes away, fused to the chair. Years pass in silence. He frees himself, claws closer, and stares into the distortion. It stares back, a face smeared and distorted, his own face. Rescuers find the desiccated corpse, eyes frozen upward, and one technician lingers. The smear, ever calling. Axel could see a smear, something just inside the vessel's skin. He blinked, rubbed his eyes. It was still there. "Query?" he asked. "What am I seeing?" The voice responded. "I cannot know what you are seeing. I can only know what you are looking at." "All right," he said. "What am I looking at?" The voice did not respond. Why did the voice not respond? Surely it knew what he meant. And then he remembered. "Query," he said. "What am I looking at?" The voice responded immediately. "Bulkhead." "No," he said. "There's something there, something more." The voice in his head responded. "Interior of your faceplate." "No," he said. "Not that either." He called on the vessel to remove his helmet, which it did by extruding a chrome claw from a bulkhead and plucking it deftly off his head. Why did it do that, he wondered. It could have done it just as easily by deploying a focused magnetic field. Was the vessel trying to unsettle him? He looked again. The smear was still there, just in front of the bulkhead, a few inches away from it, over his head, perhaps a meter long, a half-meter wide. He reached up and tried to touch it, but, strapped down as he was, couldn't reach. "Query," he repeated. "What am I looking at?" "Bulkhead," the voice insisted. "No," he said. "Between myself and the bulkhead." For a long time the voice said nothing. Had he gotten the form wrong? He didn't need to say "query" again, did he? But then, finally, hesitantly, the voice spoke. "Are you looking at the object properly? Is your gaze centered upon it? If your gaze is not centered upon it, you are no longer looking at it. You are merely remembering it." He instructed the vessel to reposition his chair until the smear was centered in his vision. He focused his eyes on it. He held his gaze steady, unblinking. "Query," he repeated. "What am I looking at?" "Bulkhead," the voice said. "No!" he replied, irritated. "In front of the bulkhead!" "There is nothing between your eyes and the bulkhead." But it was there. He could see it. A smear, semi-transparent but clearly present. He was sure he could see it. What was he seeing? "I could tell you what you are looking at," the voice said. "Unbidden, but not what you are seeing." which made him wonder if the voice had burrowed deeper into his head than he had realized and could hear what he was thinking. Apart from the vessel, apart from the voice, he had been alone for a very long time. He had been strapped into the vessel, and then the vessel had been accelerated to a tremendous rate, albeit very gradually, over the course of days, so as not to kill him. The chair had been made so that he would never have to leave it until he left the vessel for good. The chair was now so integrated with his body that it was hard for him to remember where body stopped and chair began. When he awoke, he felt as if he didn't have a body. It was a tremendous effort to move a digit, let alone a limb. When he awoke, the vessel displayed on the inside of his faceplate a countdown of the months, days, minutes, and seconds before deceleration would begin. "Off," he whispered, and the vessel reduced the countdown to a red pixel. Why was he awake? Was he meant to be awake? Was he still groggy? Still woozy? Maybe he wasn't awake at all, but only dreaming. He wasn't meant to be awake in the vessel, ever. "Why am I awake?" he whispered, and immediately there were words in front of his eyes as if the faceplate had been written on. It was the vessel, responding. "Unexpected failure in storage system," the words read. "What failure?" he asked. "Storage system component 3/9A0XV. "Excuse me?" he said, upon which the vessel displayed a series of schematics that made no sense to him at all. So he would remain unstored for the rest of the trip. Would he die? The vessel indicated he would not die. It would feed him intravenously through the chair, converting the molecules of extraneous portions of itself into nourishment. Would he waste away sitting in the chair? The vessel indicated no. It would continue the stimulation of muscles and nerves that it had been conducting while he was in storage, which meant that his body was continuously twitching, his muscles bunching and releasing, though he was not the one doing it. It was being done to him. He asked the vessel for a distraction. It opened a feed to his faceplate and showed him space around itself, mostly black, a few specks of light. He asked if it had music or some sort of teleplay. As it turned out, no, it didn't. He was never meant to be awake. Nobody was ever meant to be awake on the vessel. The vessel could show him space. The vessel could show him schematics. Perhaps, if he told it stories, he hoped, it could learn to tell them back. Indeed, it did tell them back, verbatim each time. When he instructed it to construct its own stories, it offered a mishmash of what he'd already told it, repurposed in a way that made little sense. And so instead, he regarded schematics, examined a representation of space on the inside of his faceplate, traced the curve of the bulkhead with his eyes. He slept, woke, slept. He never ate, but fed intravenously, was never hungry. At least, not at first. He watched his body grow lean, hardly an ounce of fat left, his suit draped loosely on him. "Are you sure I'm being fed enough to survive?" he asked. "Technically speaking," the vessel responded, "you are being fed enough to survive." The voice manifested after several weeks of being awake, alone. At first, he sensed it more than heard it, had a strange inkling that something was there, speaking to him, or rather, trying to speak to him. Was it the vessel? At first he thought yes, it was the vessel, but they didn't talk quite alike. And when he asked the vessel about the voice, it seemed baffled. For some time, days, even weeks, he simply listened. He taught himself to filter out the noise of the vessel around him and just wait, listen. It was as if the voice was there, slightly beyond a frequency he could hear, making his eardrums throb slightly, but not in a way that conveyed sense. He spoke to it, tried to coax to it to speak back until, suddenly, to his surprise, it did. It had rules, formula that must be followed, patterns of speech it seemed prone to respond to. He stumbled onto them only slowly and gradually. It would not always tell him what he wanted to know. There was still much he didn't know. "Vessel," he whispered, "please replace my helmet." The same chrome claw on the long pale arm plucked the helmet from the floor with surprising delicacy and pushed it back onto his head. When it was affixed, he looked again for the smear through the faceplate. It was still there, still visible. It didn't matter what the voice claimed. He asked the vessel about the smear. "There is nothing there," the voice said again, despite his not following discourse protocol. "I already told you. I wasn't speaking to you," Axel said. "I was speaking to the vessel." But the vessel did not respond. The faceplate in front of his eyes remained blank. "Have you disabled my interface?" he asked. There was no response, either from vessel or from voice. "Query, have you disabled my interface?" he asked. Query. The voice responded. What is an interface? Interface. What an odd word, he told himself. Interface would mean inside the face. Within the face, which made sense, but interface would be between the face. What could that possibly mean? Between the face. Query, he began, but the voice immediately cut him off. "Don't ask," it said. It had a tone now. Did it have a tone? Had it had that mocking tone before? What was the voice? What did it have to do with him? Why was he willing to listen to it? Why hadn't he panicked? But no matter how he tried to work himself up, he couldn't bring himself to panic. Maybe the voice was doing that to him too. His arm was little more than a stick wrapped in skin. Looking at it, it didn't look like an arm that could possibly belong to him. In fact, the more he looked at it, the less it looked like an arm at all. But when had he taken his suit off? Why was he looking at a bare arm at all? And why, if he wasn't wearing his suit, was he wearing his helmet? Or wait, was he wearing his helmet? His gaze slowly slid to the smear and then wandered away. If he looked out of the corner of his eye, it almost made sense, almost looked familiar. He tried to look at it and not look at it at the same time, but, like the voice had been at first, it felt as if he could almost sense something, but not quite, as if whatever it was had impinged on this world by accident, was only being seen because of an anomaly. What if that anomaly is me? He wondered. Or was the voice wondering it? Perhaps, if he got closer, perhaps if he regarded it from one side, at an oblique angle. "Vessel," he whispered, "move the chair forward." But the chair didn't move. The vessel was paying him no heed. Perhaps, as with the smear, it no longer realized he was there. He kept looking, kept staring. Part of him felt the smear was staring back, watching him. Was it staring back? No. It was only a smear. A smear couldn't stare. If he could only get closer, move a little nearer, then he'd see it clearly. He was sure, almost sure. Time went by. Years, maybe, or what felt like years. When he regarded his arm again, it still didn't look like an arm. When he lifted the claw on the end of it and touched the release and kept pushing until the belts restraining him actually parted, it looked even less than an arm. It took tremendous effort to free himself from the chair, and more effort still to crawl across the deck. Still more to turn and look upward to regard the smear. Was it still there? Yes, it was still there, only differently distended from this angle. It was almost a face. It was almost a human face. He crawled a little closer, looked up again. Still smeared, still distorted, though anthropomorphically transformed. Yes, a face, maybe. He crawled until his head was touching the surface of the bulkhead, and then looked up again. Yes, a face very much like his own face, in fact. He stared into it, filled with wonder. After a moment, the face smiled tightly in a way that bared its teeth, or would have bared them if what was inside the mouth were teeth. They scanned the small craft. Nothing harmful detected, no extraordinary presences, nothing to give pause. Out of caution, they kept the craft quarantined, alone at its dock for several weeks, before finally sending a team in. The man was out of his chair, eyes wide open, staring at the upper portion of the vessel's bulkhead. He had been torn free of the chair, and his legs were tangled with a snarl of tubes and wires, many of which were still attached to his body. A discolored spill of dried fluid spread in a trail behind him. His neck was bent impossibly upward, his body desiccated and bloodless. "Where's his suit?" asked one of the technicians. The other shrugged. "I don't know," he said. "What's with his arm?" "Arm?" said the other. "Is that what that is?" It was contorted, and little more than bone. He reached out and pushed down on the arm with his boot. The body yawed to one side, hollow, or nearly so. When he drew his boot back, the body rocked back and forth, slowly settling onto the floor. He grunted. "What do we do with him?" "Incinerate him," said the other. "And the craft?" There was a long moment before the other responded. "No reason to destroy that," he finally said. "We could salvage it." But he wasn't looking at the other technician as he said it. Instead, he seemed to be looking at a spot high up the bulkhead, near the curve where the wall became ceiling. He took a step forward and reached his hand out through the air, as if to touch something. Then he drew back and stared at his gloved hand. "What is it?" asked the other. "Nothing," he said, confused. "I thought I saw something. My faceplate must be dirty." The other nodded. He started for the airlock. When he realized the first wasn't following, he stopped, looking back. "Coming?" he asked. "Just a moment," said the first. He had pulled one arm from its sleeve and back into his suit, and now had it pressed between the suit and his chest. He worked the fingers up past where the suit joined the helmet, trying to rub at the faceplate from the inside. "Come on," the other insisted. "You go ahead," the first managed to say. "I'll follow you in a moment." All alone, he stood there, hand caught between his throat and the rim of the helmet, waiting. He had seen something, he was sure, or almost. A swath, a fluttering, something almost visible. What was it, he wondered, or not quite that? Query, what was it? He wondered. Yes, that was what the thought had been. What a strange way to think. He wriggled his fingers, swallowed. He waited, listened. You have made it to the end. I appreciate that you stuck through all of those stories, or just this one, either way. Thank you for listening, and remember, the blue is always watching, so don't forget to like the video. Also, if you like the content, subscribe. If you have any suggestions, critiques, or anything, let me know down in the comments. I always appreciate anyone's feedback. Until next time, remember, there are only a few ways to escape the blue.